Bonjour, good afternoon, mesdames et messieurs. Welcome to Untold Horror Presents Monsters Must Live, a special group artist talk that continues Dave Alexander's work, exploring unproduced screens that once may have been. Joining him today are a trio of filmmakers that we love with heaps of stories and images to share. Without further ado, it is my great pleasure to turn the virtual stage over to Dave Alexander. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, Mitch. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Can everyone hear me okay? Well, I hope they can. Welcome to Monsters Must Live. This is a presentation of Untold Horror. And Untold Horror started at Fantasia Festival several years ago when co-creator Mark Polisel and I went to some of the pitch meetings. And we started to wonder about all these great ideas that never seemed to come to fruition. And at the time, I was also the editor-in-chief of Rue Morgue magazine, and I would hear all kinds of stories, kind of water cooler talk about what happened to this film that got announced, and what about the Cabal cut of Nightbreed and all that kind of stuff. And so it went from there. And we've been working on it as a brand for the past few years. The pandemic put a big pause on everything. But this month, on the 18th, the Untold Horror book is finally coming out. It's going to be published by Dark Horse, and we're super excited about it. So the panelists that we have today are all featured in the book, and they all have a ton of stories. I'm going to introduce them to you. So we've got Brian Yuzna here today. He's a veteran producer and director, huge fan favorite. He's behind dozens of films. The RE-ANIMATOR series, for starters. Society, one of my favorites. From Beyond and Dagon, also a couple of my favorites. Return of the Living Dead 3, The Dentist, and loads more stuff. In addition, we have William Malone. He's one of the masters of horror. His film and TV resume includes stuff like Scared to Death, Tales from the Crypt, House on Haunted Hill, Freddy's Nightmares, Fear.com, Masters of Horror, of course, and Parasomnia. And our third guest is Richard Raaphorst, who's joining us from the Netherlands. And aside from writing and directing Frankenstein's Army, he's done incredible concept art and title design, working on films such as Fragiles, Black Book, Beyond RE-ANIMATOR, Dagon, Faust, tons more stuff. And these are like three of the most fascinating, most talented, monster-loving dudes I know, and I'm so pleased to have them here today. Hey, guys.
It's great to be here.
Hi.
Everyone got their mic on?
Got it. I have.
All right.
Can you hear me?
Beautiful. Yeah, I can hear you guys great. Welcome to the new world of virtual festing. Amazing. So I'll just maybe start with explaining why I called it Monsters Must Live. One of the reasons is, aside from the fact that all of us love monsters, so that's a bit of a no-brainer. The world of Untold Horror is so big. You can just go down endless rabbit holes, open so many doors. There's so many things to talk about. So it gave us a little bit of focus, I think, which is key. And all of you guys have made some really great monster movies, but also have attempted to make some incredible monster movies. And so we can focus on that a little bit today. And maybe what I'll do is I'll throw a question out for all you guys to answer before we kind of focus in a little bit on things. Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, each of you, is there, and I'm not even talking about a project. I'm just going to focus in on a monster. Is there one monster that you've always wanted to bring to the screen, that you've tried to bring to the screen that you haven't been able to yet? And we can elaborate on the project after, but let's start with that because it's kind of fun. Brian, do you want to take a shot at that?
Well, I don't know. I think there'd be too many, I guess. I always wanted to do a version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, because I just never saw one that was the way I saw it. I would love to do that, but there's so many of them. Right now, what I'd really love to do is The Beast of Blood, which I would really love to to bring back to the screen, and I'm working on it.
And I think you should show off your Beast of Blood shirt.
This is my Beast of Blood shirt. I'm trying to be forward positive.
All right. Bill, I'm going to throw that same question over to you.
Well, I mean, God, we all have so many projects that have been like in the dumpster, that we've been trying to get made for years. I guess probably for me, it would have been the world of the Giger, which I wanted to do with in the Mirror, the project, The Mirror. And I guess the main creature in there is what I call the Bio Queen, which is the main thing in our film, which is one of Giger's paintings that was, that I wanted to bring to life. So yeah, that was something. Yeah. Oh yeah. That's there you go. Nice. That's a painting by Jim Danforth, by the way. That who's a great effects guy. He did that painting for me as a concept art.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I worked with him. Yeah, he was a stop motion
animator. Yeah, but he was also really
which is an ancient creature in its own right.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, we're definitely gonna dive more into the world of Giger shortly. But Richard, this is actually probably going to be very difficult for you, I think, given the amount of creature design that you've done and the amazing stuff I've seen. Shoot us one that comes to mind that you'd love to put on the screen.
I really don't know, actually. Does it have to be an iconic creature which is already out there, or just my own?
No, I'd love to hear your concept for one of your own ones that you're dying to put on the screen.
Something I'm dying to put on the screen is the idea of reverse evolution, that you will dissolve back into a primordial state, but then within minutes. Like the submarine with, the tentacle parts at the end. That's, okay, this is some different story, but I would like to do something with mechanical versus biological shapes underwater. Does that make sense now? But yeah, something based on the concept of reverse evolution, but not really an iconic creature. That's I really don't know.
You're talking sort of referring to a project you've been pitching called Profundus.
Exactly.
And we've got a couple images for it in the book because I absolutely love this art. So look at this guy.
Here we are. Yeah.
I think that speaks to sort of your interest in, not only stuff that's military, as you can see by the submarine, but also sort of biomechanical body horror.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you for helping me out.
Thank you for helping me make this book. And I'd also like to ask you guys, before we get a little further into it, if you had to guess, what do you think your ratio is of films that you've been able to make to ones that you haven't been able to get on the screen? Brian, do you think you can even answer that?
I would say 1 in 20 or 50. I have boxes of projects. So the vast majority of things haven't been made.
And let me follow it up by asking you, do you think there's a number one reason that these films don't get made?
Because it's very difficult to get a film financed. It's very difficult. It's not and you think that if you've done it before, that should make it easier. Yeah, it's definitely easier for someone who's done it before than someone who hasn't, but doesn't mean it's easy. It's it takes a lot of money to make a movie. And unless you just happen to have that in your bank account, you have to find people who are willing to risk money, spend money to do what you want to do. That's hard.
If I may say, I think in the modern era, the problem is that there's just too many people that you have to please in order to get a film made. There was a time, back a number of years ago when you had guys like, Louis B. Mayer or those guys, Harry Cohn and stuff like that. And they just go, oh, I want to make that, and they just go do it. And they were essentially gamblers. and that's a bygone era. And now we're living in the world of corporations, and it's got to go through like 50 guys before you get your movie made, and every one of them wants to justify their job by saying no to your project. So,
I think not going back to the studio system, which of course we didn't know, but I think the 80s and the video revolution was a time when there were so many independent production companies, because video, you could sell direct back then, before the majors stepped in, before Blockbuster became the Netflix of its day. And back then you could talk directly to the company that, to the guy who made the decision. And if he wanted to do it, he would go for it. So I think that even within my experience, there was a time when it was much easier.
Oh yeah, there's no question that the video era was much easier. It was much easier to get things financed. But also, I think the internet and piracy have destroyed the finances of getting films made. So I mean, it's much harder to get money because it's much more difficult to get your money back.
Yeah, though that's certainly the case, because back in the 80s and 90s, you could actually go to an investor or a company and show them a reasonable plan that would get them back, say, 80% of their money, which is enough to gamble on. But today, you can't even show them that anything would come back.
And movies have really gone down to where they're either $200 million or $100,000. There's not much in between.
Yeah, and for an ambitious genre film with a lot of effects, of course, that's going to hurt that part of the genre. What would you say your ratio is, Bill?
Oh gosh, I imagine 3% of the things that I wanted to make. But I have to say at the same time, that's nothing new. I once was fortunate enough to sit on an airplane with Kurt Siodmak. I was talking to this old guy, and I started asking him questions, and he turned out to be Kurt Siodmak. And we spent 3.5 hours talking about film. And one of the things he told me is, I said, well, do you have any scripts that haven't been produced? He says, are you kidding? I've got a garage full.
So this is nothing new, of course.
Nothing new.
How about yourself, Richard?
I didn't try a lot. I don't have many projects, but I was always very faithful to only a few ideas, and so my ratio is 1-3. I think I only had 3 really important projects in my life, and I only made one. And probably I'm going now make the second one, so that will be 2 out of 3.
I don't want to contradict you, Richard, but I think I know more than 3 projects of yours personally.
Yeah, we are talking about feature films, right?
Yeah, I would say features, sure.
Yeah. So we have FRANKENSTEIN'S ARMY, worst case scenario, and
Fungus.
2
worst case
okay,
scenario.
4.
2 worst case scenario. And what's the one about the mushroom people?
Yeah, that's Fungus. That's Fungus.
Yeah.
That's the mushroom people. Yeah.
Okay,
so you're right. Then it's 4 projects. But when I have a project, then I'm going to digest it for years and years and years. You're going to do the same thing. Well, I think should have done more projects, in my wallet than instead of only 1. But,
well, if we're going to talk about eating mushrooms, Richard, I think you should give us the elevator pitch for Fungus.
Well, the idea has already been done now, but it's about a village where the construction workers are getting, doing the road work and the schools work, but actually they are infected by this fungus, and the fungus are using them to isolate the village and turning it into one big they isolate the village so they can just infect everyone in there. And the The story is about a woman and her son who are trying to escape out of this little village while it's being consumed by this fungus. But the fungus is acting like like a beehive. Like its consciousness is spread all over those people, so they are, it's living like a parasite in.
So it's a metaphor for the film industry. I
lost my money.
It reminds me a little bit of a story that was written in 1900, I think it was, that turned into Mantango, the
Japanese film, right? Yeah.
But it was actually done before that with Alfred Hitchcock on the show Suspicion, did an episode based on that story,
Wow.
So it's got it's a historical value. So,
right. I want to drill down a little bit. Brian, let's wade into the ocean of RE-ANIMATOR movies that you've attempted to make. There's some amazing stuff.
I've got more versions of RE-ANIMATOR than you can shake a stick at.
What we'll do is
I always wanted to do a series of comics to tell all of the stories in line, because it's just a shame that there's just some great I think they're great. They're probably not that great.
Well, your original concept for RE-ANIMATOR, if I recall, before the first film came out, is you actually wanted it to be a TV series. Is that correct?
No, Stuart did. No,
Stuart did. Okay.
When I met Stuart, I had actually put an ad in Variety that said horror director wanted before I moved out here. This is before fax machines. I got loads of letters. But anyway, when I met Stuart in Chicago, he was a theater director. He had already had a pilot script for a TV show. And I mean a TV show, not a cable show. This is when broadcast was the only game. And so he had already had this idea of making RE-ANIMATOR, which was a story I'd never heard of, into a TV series. And I just said that if he wanted to develop it into a feature, then I was on board. And that's what we did. But yeah, it was originally an episodic type thing.
And of course, you guys did make RE-ANIMATOR, and it was, huge cult classic. And then you followed that up with a couple sequels. We got Bride of RE-ANIMATOR and Beyond RE-ANIMATOR. Now, one of the interesting things about Beyond RE-ANIMATOR is the way it evolved from what you originally conceived into what the film actually became, which is, I think, an interesting topic to touch on, because it sort of shows that as a producer, you have to constantly evolve to your financial and geographical, even cast situations. So tell us a little bit about what you had originally envisioned for Beyond RE-ANIMATOR.
Well, originally it was originally started with the trial of Herbert West. And so that was the prologue, in which we see Dan Kane going state's evidence. And then Dan Kane becomes a great almost like a celebrity transplant surgeon, specializing in like heart, lung, and the most complicated transplants, because he still had some of the serum. The deal he made with the DA was that he would get the notes and what was in the bag. And so he would like paint a diluted bit of the serum with his transplants. And he had great success at that, but he was unsuccessful at recreating the serum from the notes. And he had become kind of a morally, because he turned on Herbert, and he was so bitter about the whole thing of losing his life with Meg, and his whole life was upset by Herbert West, that he was kind of unethical, kind of immoral type guy, and had series of trophy wives and et cetera, and was kind of a drunk and And at one point, the DA that he made the deal with is running, or the assistant district attorney that he makes the deal with is running for like state office, like the attorney general or something. And she's in a compromising position where somebody is killed and it's going to ruin her campaign. And she goes to Dan and says that he has to, she needs his help. She knew about that serum. Says if you can bring her back, she can tell us. The victim can tell us who did it, and then we'll be able to. I can take care of this stuff outside of official lines. It hadn't been reported to the police or anything. And of course, Dan is unable to do that, and so he feels like he has to go get Herbert West out of prison to come and help him. Of course, West hates him at this point. And West, meanwhile, and this ended up in the movie because when I finally made the movie, it was in Spain, and I couldn't do all that long, complicated stuff. And I just decided to make the whole movie a prison movie because I could kind of get a prison and make it be kind of like the US, And so then it always was about Wes doing research on rats because I always felt like Wes always is driven by the work. It's not, I think the original TV series episodic, it was more like now he's going to fight the voodoo guy, and now it was kind of how episodic stories go. And I always felt like Wes needs to have it. In the first one, he's defeating death and bringing dead people to life. In the second one, he's going to create new life. He's going to do the Frankenstein thing of putting body parts together. In the third one, he was going to perfect the serum because he decides in jail doing his experiments that the amount of weight that a body loses upon death is actually this nanoplasmic energy that makes the cells grow, which is my theory about zombies in general. And so but the trick is you've got to like electrocute somebody to drive the stuff into the NPE into their spine, and you can pull it out into a battery. And if you put that with a reanimated subject, they'll be normal. So that was always the key to the story. In the original version, that whole business of getting West out was all about getting a victim, a murder victim, to pursue the serial killer. And, he would be the big bad guy where the NPE would end up. And in that version, Dan Kane was in it, and Dan Kane ends up getting killed, and the bad serum, it's the Frankenstein thing, the bad NPE is put in him. And so you can see it was a very complicated story. And when I was in Spain, I could make any movie. For a few years, I could make any movie I wanted. And I made deals to make movies and develop them. And so one of the ways we sold our first slate was by having the Re-Animator title in it. I always knew the title, and I had some artwork before I had a final treatment. And I had all these stories about it, but I realized that I needed to kind of limit the location, just bring it into something more focused. So I thought, well, I'll just do a prison movie, and a prison movie already tells you the story. The story of a prison movie is getting out. Every prison movie is about getting out. You do or you don't, but that's the whole point of it. So in a prison movie, ultimately, whatever is going to happen, it's got to result in West getting out or not getting out. And so that's how it all kind of became. And because I was in Spain, I really couldn't be running around the hospitals and outdoor stuff. And it's just too difficult, to fake the US. And all your actors are Spanish. So a lot of them you're dubbing, a lot of them, you have a lot of obstacles in the way. So you kind of want to focus in on one thing. And then, so that's how it came about.
Okay. So the clever producer works backwards from his means in order to get the film done. So in the mid 2000s, you were attempting to launch a second trilogy of Re-Animator films. Probably the most well known is House of Re-Animator, which had William H. Macy committed to play the president at one point. There's stories about that online. There was some fan art, just a really, really cool concept. And then there was Island of Re-Animator, which would be a lot more Lovecraftian. I think this is a good time to talk to Richard about some of the artwork that he did for that, because people don't know you and Richard have worked together on numerous occasions.
Yeah. But it's not Island of Re-Animator. It was always called Re-Animator Unbound with an exclamation mark.
Gotcha. Richard, you have some artwork that you can talk about and maybe show us from that. Is that correct?
Yes, as a matter of fact, yes. It's quite a long time ago, so it was indeed Re-Animator Unbound, but I also remember that the other titles, I think it was not really a serious project, but you were talking about an island of Re-Animator. Maybe it was just not so very serious. And
Re-Animator in the White House. Re-Animator Unbound originally took place on an island. The reason was I was living in Indonesia at that time, and I was making movies there, and I realized that I needed a Re-Animator that I could shoot in Indonesia, because I could get all these extras and like I needed something that fit where I was, and so I thought, well, let it be like the island of Dr. Moreau. So it was on an island originally.
That I remember. I remember that. Yeah. So there was not a story or a script or whatever, but I started already, like, it already sparked my mind, because the island, a Re-Animator, and my brain went, poof. So I just started random making associations that came up in my mind. And yesterday, my mother just took a whole folder out of the closet and said, "Hey, Richard, here are your drawings." And I really thought I lost them all, but here, look at this. You all saved it. And it's all based on that particular idea. But
so, Richard, just hold that up slowly a little, push it into the camera a bit so everyone can get a look, and tell us what we're looking at here.
I really don't know, but it looks like a lot of body parts that you can just click together and create your own zombie, like the IKEA furniture. But this is like a do-it-yourself zombie kit. Very handy. It's a long time ago, but I think here and on the top you have separate modules that you can choose which one you can use as a head. And a lot of other stuff. I also found the original drawing of the zombie drinking milk.
Oh, that was for Beyond Re-Animator.
This one,
I love this image.
I don't know, it was with a woman collapsing because all the spines are bending and twitching until, this is also for Beyond Re-Animator. Yeah, this is Beyond a con.
So push it a little closer to the camera. We can get a look at this guy in a prison uniform. What's going on with him?
Yeah, his legs are completely crunching and morphing. Let's see. I had a really nice one here. Where is it? I don't know this one. It's Herbert West using the serum himself.
Yeah, that's a great image.
I don't know why.
It captures his personality.
Yeah.
Well, and where's that milk one?
Yeah. This is the milk one.
Okay, yeah, hold that up close. It's hilarious. If you look on the bottom, you can see a headless zombie. I think he's going into the fridge and he's gonna drink some milk in his neck hole.
Yeah, see that. Like,
so that turned into the prologue of Beyond Re-Animator. Richard's drawing. He ended up pouring it into his mouth, and it comes out his cut throat, of course. But that ended up being the core of the opening scene.
I remember it. Yeah, I also found this one. I think it's about the knee thing again. The uncontrollable spasms.
I
So
think
cool.
this might have been from Unbound. I'm not sure.
Unbound, maybe. Okay.
Well, we've got.
Although Unbound had a lot of metal fused.
I'm gonna throw up
Then
some
it's
images
Unbound.
from the book. I mean, there's so many incredible, crazy Re-Animator images that we were only able to put like a few of them in there. But like, look at some of this stuff. It's wild.
The original concept for Unbound was that West would now be working for the Black Ops after House of Re-Animator, and they're giving him. They gave him for the first time the lab of his dreams. He has everything now. It's not.
Now I remember.
He's always struggling to get.
Yeah.
Working in a basement, stealing stuff, getting body parts. Well, now they're airdropping dead soldiers to him because House of Re-Animator and Unbound ends up beginning. House of Re-Animator is the prologue with the reanimated president nuking North Korea when West helped her do it.
Yes.
And so they're like delivering, they're airdropping bodies to West to make augmented soldiers that he can control. And while he's doing this for the Black Ops, he's also built himself a particle collider around his lab. And that is so that he can merge the NPE and the serum in a way that it quits being a zero-sum element. You don't have to kill somebody to get the NPE. Once you get some NPE, you can mix it with the serum. Then when you bring people back, they should be absolutely normal. Of course, what could go wrong? It goes out of control, and because of the augmented soldiers, and he ends up, creating a rift in the space-time continuum. And this is linking Re-Animator to Cthulhu, to an actual Lovecraft multiverse.
Indeed.
Lovecraft. Lovecraft, Re-Animator wasn't really. It's not cosmic horror. It's not the kind of Lovecraft that we think. And so when this comes from another dimension, it needs to find something in this world to inhabit it. It's not made of the same stuff, so it'll just join up vegetable matter, mineral, machines, humans, and you get all these monstrosities like a Lucio Fulci, The Beyond. Like I kind of thought that
things are
accident would create this Giallo Beyond of this horror landscape where everything was alive and horrible. And Richard just made some great fleshy mountains crawling across the landscape.
So, but if I recall, though, some of your designs were a little much for Brian, weren't they, Richard? Didn't he give you a particular response when you sent him some of the really wild stuff, like the meat trees that were going to be harvested for body parts and things like that?
Oh, I kind of like that.
Yeah, the meat tree. Well, we are very close to that, actually. Now, I remember that I was, at the time, I was a bit wild, I guess. And I was just fountain of ideas all the day long. It just came out unstoppable. And I was just throwing stuff to Brian, and he just picks them up like yes or no, yes or no. And I think it worked a bit like that. I really liked it. I loved it, and
I think that process is very similar from Bill's Mirror project, which I'm very familiar with.
That's a great
because
segue.
he had the Giger stuff art, and then of course he had it all done, that whole book of Necronomicon. I think it was all the drawings, all the stuff from the Necronomicon. And so he was able to kind of use that to kind of imagine a movie with images that's spun in his mind. I mean, I'm not trying to.
Well, that's Bill, perfect.
But
I think
that's how I experience it with Richard or with Screaming Mad George. When I find kind of people that I think are kind of visionary that fit with me, I just dive in and say, how can we back engineer this into a cool movie?
Well,
That's
I think-
a great segue into talking about your collaborations with Giger, Bill. And we'll set it up a little bit, but why don't you tell me first about how you came to work with him in the first place? Because that's kind of a cool story.
Well, actually, I was working for a company called Donpo Studios at the time, which was a makeup lab and mostly mask company. And we made Halloween masks, and we got the rights to Alien. And I have to backtrack a little bit. Before Alien came out, I was actually at a sci-fi a fest, and there was a bookseller, and he had a book sitting on the desk amongst all these others, and I picked it up, and I think the top of my head just blew off, and it was H.R. Giger's The Necronomicon. And I said, I have to have this book, so I bought the book, and I remember taking it home and just laying it out on the floor. And I think I must have spent like 3 days just staring at the images and stuff. And so when Alien came about, I was already well familiar with them. And in fact, when I think I heard like Walter Hiller say something that they pulled the Alien, this is before the movie was released, they said they pulled the Alien out of the book. And I looked through the book and I said, well, that's the Alien, right? That's the only thing it could be. So, but yeah, I mean, so anyway, I wound up sculpting a face hugger for Donpo Studios, from Alien. And while they stuck me in the basement of 20th Century Fox because it was so secret that they wouldn't let anything out. And so I was in this little room down in the executive building, and it was like really circuitous. And anyway, but H.R. Giger came in and was giving me hints on how to sculpt it and stuff like that. So that was my first meeting with him, and we actually struck up a good friendship at that point. So. So then, seeing, of course, the artwork, then I started coming up with an idea. So what can I make? I think it's like Brian said, what can I make on, this is a movie. I know this is a movie in here somewhere. What is it? And I spent quite a few weeks trying to figure out what it was. And that's when I came up with the story for the mirror.
And well, I think the great thing about the mirror was that you left the Alien thing.
Yeah,
which I think that was great, because we've seen Alien. We saw what was the other one with the train?
Isobar?
Species?
Huh?
Species?
Poltergeist?
Species.
You mean Poltergeist?
No, the Giger, the other Giger one that was that.
Well, there was
the train in it.
One.
There was a train that made it into Species in like a dream sequence, but that was originally from a film called Isobar, I believe, that he tried to get made.
Well, but the thing that was great about, I always thought that Bill did, is he didn't go, oh, well, we've got to do it as an alien, which anybody looking at anything Giger now, they go, oh, that's an alien. And Bill did, no, this is different. This is a mirror. There's it's a world that's here, but we're not talking about outer space, which makes it, I think, much scarier and much more accessible.
Well, so, Bill, you would describe the plot of the mirror as sort of basically a really dark, Giger-esque version of Alice Through the Looking Glass. So
that's pretty correct. I mean, that's how I saw it. And I was doing, actually at the time, I was doing a lot of research on Stephen Hawking and his theories and stuff on alternate dimensions. And I thought, well, it would be great if you had the Giger world is parallel to ours, but it's just like a heartbeat in front of us or behind us in time. In other words, all you have to, if you could just turn the clock, half a second, you'd be in that world. And that's what the mirror does. And it transports you to his dimension, or the dimension of and what I came up with is that this was a dimension of machines, a dimension where it's our future projected like 10 million years from now. And what the idea is that machines, just like we're building machines, eventually the machines became sentient and we became obsolete. And it takes it even beyond that and goes to where the machines have now been around so long that they're not even like necessarily mobile things. They're just giant pieces of metal that are trying to and they don't actually even know what they're trying to do now. What they realize is they have to get back to their roots. So they have to find a human to try and recreate their creators, basically. So they've sent this mirror back to our world through a portal that they opened up, and they're now, and maybe 10,000 years ago, they pulled a male from our world, and now they're looking for a female counterpart to pull through the mirror and create a new race of beings to help them sort of recreate their origins. So that's the basic premise of the film. And
well, while you're speaking, I was showing pages from the lookbook that you guys did to pitch it,
right,
which has a bunch of Giger's original art, and you were inspired by a bunch of those specific pieces, and that's why they're in there. So this was probably the project that Giger, it was kind of the most pure Giger project in terms of his aesthetic. Would you agree?
I think so. Giger was very on board with this, of course, because I told Giger, I mean, what I wanted to do is I didn't want this to be an inexpensive film. I saw this as like, at the time when we were doing it, I saw it as like $100 million or, $75 million movie. And I said, I want to build the sets full scale. I don't want to like cheap out on it. I don't even want to like much, matte paintings. I thought, I want to just do it. Let's build it, and he was, of course, very excited about that idea and was very on board with it. So, I think it would have been an amazing film. And it's one of the sad things, when you're filmmakers, when you have a project like that, and I'm sure you guys can, attest to the movies that you've got like that, where you just go, this is, people don't understand, the people that you're pitching the movies just don't understand what it is you're trying to make. So
now, you talked about some of the set pieces. This is a model that you built of the Thanatron based on Giger's art, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that was for another film, though. That's actually for Dead Star, which.
That was for Dead Star. My apologies.
Yeah.
So
okay.
There's another.
Fantastic.
You guys, I'm not going to get into it because we have limited time. But if you pick up the book, you can read about Giger and Bill Malone's previous collaboration on a movie called Dead Star and the crazy trajectory that took as something that went totally out of your hands. But
I
back
think
to
we wound up working with a lot of like producers who were like off on another planet. I don't know.
But I was wondering, do you have any of the items kicking around within reach from the mirror that you can show us? I know you've got some scopes and stuff.
I'll be right back.
All right.
Talk amongst yourself.
we certainly can. So one of the things that we can actually touch on is the idea of when you're going to pitch one of these films, how vital is it to lead with some imagery? Like you've got a lookbook, you've got extensive production sketches, sculpts, that kind of stuff. I'd love to hear both of you speak briefly on your philosophy on that.
Richard?
I only made one movie, so I really don't know. But my philosophy is that you can tell a script or an idea with, let's say, a mood board and some key images, like a first act, a middle act, and a last act. So you see a kind of development in a story. But my experience is also that if you just give away too much, then it is counter. Then you might bring the project in danger again. If you are oversell it with images, I think that's not a really good idea. I think somehow the buyer has to stay hungry.
That's interesting. Brian, I would ask you, maybe specifically, do you think you should go in and pitch a monster movie without having some sort of visual of what the monster would be?
I think it depends. If there was a time when I could just say, let's do, like with From Beyond, we never developed any images. We just said, let's do this story. And then we started working. But today, especially if you're trying to get financing, you need what they call a deck, which is a presentation. These days, it's a document, computer document, and you kind of do what a pitch is. But Richard's right. You don't want to give too much, because then there's too much to reject. You want to
exactly.
You want to pique the interest, but not say this is what it's going to end up being, because everybody involved has to be able to project their own desire or their own imagination or ambition on a movie. Everybody has to be able to do that. So yes, you should. If you were doing a drama or something, you'd be pitching the actors. Say, you're not going to pitch the, if you're going to do the bridges of Madison County. I don't think you're pitching the bridges. I think you're saying this is going to be these actors in this book. But when the business that we are all in is genre, and it's so much about visual.
So let's then talk about the little friend that William brought with him.
First, I want to say something to Brian about, what you're saying is really interesting, because, I have in the past made the mistake of doing promo pieces for films, and they're a double-edged sword. I mean, yes, you can show it to somebody and they'll go, oh yeah, that's great. But then they think that's all there is. And they don't realize, because you haven't spent $1 zillion making it, they think that's what they're going to get. And so a friend once asked me, should I make a promo piece to sell my movie? I said, no, don't do it, because it's not gonna help you. Anyway,
tell us about your friend.
Well, this is of course the Bio Queen, which I made this little model of it here. So
that's fantastic. Wait.
Tell us about the Bio Queen, and tell us about what that's made out of.
Oh, can you show the Bio Queen once more, please for me, and say something just so I can see you on the big screen.
Yeah. Well, this is
there you are.
This is, I think, one of Giger's prime images that we acquired.
That's fantastic.
And,
awesome.
In our story, the Bio Queen is sort of this half-assed attempt by the machines to create a human form in order to be able to talk to us, basically, or have a something that we can communicate with. Of course, this is
what I like about it is that this takes advantage of Giger used Baphomet a lot in his paintings, but in the sci-fi movies they get rid of that. But it's it's a real important part of Giger's art. Is the Baphomet was even dope, and which is kind of a pansexual type of almost human animal type of creature, but it's occult. It's an occult creature, and I think that's a part of Giger that has never been done.
Well, and I'm afraid that part of the reason it's been difficult to get Giger stuff made, because there really hasn't been that much stuff done on Giger, and I think it's because the studios have generally been afraid of Giger in some fashion, mainly because of the paintings that they'll see penises or things, and these images, they're, like you say, they're basically occult and so forth, and they're afraid that that's what they're going to get.
They're disturbing. I always thought I had a different idea about why it was difficult with Giger, which was that he's so sui generis. He's so much a brand in him. He's so recognizable that once you have alien or species, that's Giger. So when they see Giger, they go, "Oh, that's alien." They don't say that's Giger. They say that's alien. That's species. That we don't have that IP, and so it's a bit of a lack of imagination, which is typical. But it's not seeing that there's another way to use, Giger in a movie besides making it an alien.
I agree with you on it. I think that that they don't see that Alien really just barely grazed the surface of what his art is, you know. And Alien is a great film, a masterpiece, but you know, I think there's still a lot more to do as far as Giger concerned.
Yeah,
well, especially
but
once it
Alien,
went in.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Alien, I went to the Giger Museum a couple of years ago, and then I realized that Giger was obsessed by Egyptian queens with their very tall hats. And as a child, he saw all those poses of, you know, what's the Egyptian queen, Cleopatra, and the golden coffin. And he has such a almost erotic fantasy about this queen. But once he saw her in real, it was a decayed mummy. And so this sexuality and decay, he started to experiment with it. And with tall hats, evolved finally in something like Alien. That's what I've heard.
And add drugs to that, psychedelic drugs.
Just a lot of drugs, a lot of dope. Yeah.
And of course, there's the X-rated room at the museum. Did you go into the X-rated room?
Of course.
At the Giger Museum.
I just ran straight to the X-rated room.
Very pornographic.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't notice that at all. Was it?
There's two stories I have to tell about H.R. Giger, because I went over there to Zurich and spent a couple of weeks with him, and it was a really amazing experience. First of all, when he had this flat, it was basically two flats that he'd cut the one of the walls out and stuck together, and the walls
in the shape of a man.
Yeah, and the walls were all painted black. And his artwork was stacked, I don't know, probably 10 or 20 paintings deep against all the walls. And I was walking around one day, and I said, I saw one of his paintings. I said, there's some damage here. There's some holes in your painting. And he goes, oh, no, that's from my girlfriend. She blew her brains out. I left it in the painting, you know. Okay.
Well, you know, that painting of his with the girl with the gun in her mouth.
Yeah.
That's based on him watching her do that.
But she apparently killed herself in front of the painting.
Yeah, her name was Lee.
And she was his muse. She was his muse.
Yeah, I know. The other one is, but I'll give you my funny Giger story. So he said, I want to take you to a biker bar in Zurich. Okay. And I'm thinking to myself, what's a Swiss biker bar like? You know, so I said, okay. So he takes me to this bar, and it's kind of what you'd expect. I mean, it's kind of a low-slung building with a bunch of hogs all lined up out front with all the chrome and everything. We go inside, and there's a bunch of pretty tough-looking guys wearing black leather jackets and chains and stuff like that. And as we're sitting there, you know, eating, I'm listening to, you know, a couple of tables over, and there's these really tough guys sitting there talking, and they're speaking in English. And I said, Giger, how come they're speaking in English? He says, oh, it's considered very cool if you speak in English here. I said, okay. And I overhear these guys, and they're saying, you know, I think we should spray paint the name of our club on the sides of some buildings. And the other guy goes, yeah, this is a good idea. Let's check with the police first and make sure this is okay. Swiss bikers.
I had a good insight into Giger. I did visit him also and spent a weekend. Of course, you had to get, I think I saw him well after you did. By the time I saw him, it was, you got over there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, which is when he woke up and drank his tumbler of gin. And then we would have a meal as he passed around the mushrooms, to your story, Richard. But the thing that was interesting to me is he had the train in it. He had a train that went through the house, a big train, and out to the back. And then there's the train and species. And I said, what is it with this train stuff? He says, well, when I was a kid, I built a big train in my house, and he was obsessed with this size train. And at the same time, he said his family was big friends with, what's his name, Hoffman, the guy who invented LSD or discovered it. what's his, the chemist for Sandoz Labs in Switzerland, was a good friend of his father's. Hoffman was had the famous bike ride on tripping on acid, the first guy that ever took LSD. So the best friend of his family was the LSD king, and Giger with his train. You kind of go, wow, all these things. The muse that shoots herself, the Egyptian stuff. You go, wow, yeah, boy, this really comes together to make an artist. Huh?
So yeah, I mean, one of the things we've definitely established is his art was very dangerous, is the way it was sort of considered by a lot of people, and that's also why a lot of people like it. So then, Bill, tell us about what happened while trying to pitch this. Did that have something to do with ultimately why this film didn't get made?
Well, actually, the Mirror has had a lot of close calls to getting made. Actually, we had a green light from Mike Medavoy over at Orion Pictures, and of course, it was one of those things we were going to go, and then the studio got sold, and Mike Medavoy was out of favor, and you know, I'm sure that's happened to all you guys numerous times. But that the Mirror actually got very close to getting made, so we actually had a number of people who were on board with it, and did get it, but it was just a bunch of bad circumstances that it didn't get made, actually. So
I just have these visions of you kind of going into a boardroom and, you know, pitching some of these wild ideas and just being met with like.
Well, you got a lot of blank stares, that's for sure. That, you know, they just go, yeah, that's interesting, you know.
I don't, you know, maybe now you could really do it with using, you know, augmenting with digital effects. You could really create that world now, and I think they'd probably be more open to it now than they were certainly in the year 2000.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to say, you know. The other thing too is that I don't know if maybe Giger's so politically incorrect that I don't know.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think my opinion is that it's somehow the presentation has to separate it from Alien. I know that's tough but like you said, Alien is one little part of it. And by the time you get to the sequel to Alien, it's kind of like Giger.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's not really, it gets to be an action movie, and then there was the prison.
Yeah.
You know, but
I think got farther and farther away from Giger as the things went, you know.
Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about this sort of the power of art to try to make these monsters come alive. And I'm not sure if I'm familiar with a film that's had more concept art and pre-production sort of stuff done than I have Worst Case Scenario, Richard. I mean, you've created so much imagery, 3D models, maps, all kinds of stuff for this film.
I created the universe.
It's astounding, absolutely astounding. So give us the quick rundown of what Worst Case Scenario is about. And then when you started to put it out to the public, because the really interesting thing about it, it was one of the very first sort of viral movie trailers on YouTube that I can think of.
Yeah, and I only discovered this later when I did Frankenstein's Army, that, you know, people were still asking for Worst Case Scenario. And I said, how does it come? You all know this trailer. And you know, I just made a movie where I'm still talking about Worst Case Scenario. But it's about, it's in the present time. And it's about two siblings, two little kids who are outside in the typical Dutch landscape, and they find a German Iron Cross because they're always looking for bugs and worms and frogs, and they find this cross and they go home and they tell their dad, look what we found. And he thinks, you know, maybe there's more underneath the dirt. So he starts to dig and he finds this bunker in his own yard. And he doesn't know that this bunker is a portal to a maze where you have the secret factory where the Germans stored gallons of limbs and body parts, and accidentally he switches on the machine, and this machine is operating almost by itself, and it's just putting randomly pieces of body parts and metal together, and then the evasion begins with and I found it very beautiful if the evasion is almost peacefully silent. So I chose for balloons that come out of the sea and the water, and they just float all over Europe, and then it begins. And but the whole story is the perspective of those two little kids, and the relationship between those kids is that the girl know what is going on, but she wants to protect the little baby brother, and she's telling stories that what is happening is not really happening. So she is, turning him down, like, it's nothing. They're just, flying angels. It's okay. And but it's worst case scenario. So it's the end. It ends. As a worst case scenario. Does it have a happy ending?
Well, the original teaser was so great because it has that irony to it where it says, first they took over our country, the Germans, right? Then they stole the cup from us.
That's also true.
The World Cup.
The cup where they won at the last goal at the last minute, the World Cup. Like it was the Germans versus the Dutch. And now they're coming again. Worse. This is the worst case scenario.
Can it be worse?
Now the German zombies are coming out of the water. And then the second one was so great because it's the kids going through the peat moss bogs. And I was fortunate enough to go with Richard and his family and his two daughters on the barge, on the moss, peat moss bogs that he used for the drawings. And because also he shot it there, and then I actually asked him to take that teaser and make it as a comic book, because at that time I was making a comic book in Italy called Horrorama, and so we used it as the cover story, and then it was the first story in the book, and it was basically just a comic book version of the second teaser, which was so great because the kids are just worms are falling down in front of them. And you kind of go, what are these worms? And then some body part or something, and they look up, and it's it's a big hot air balloon, but it seems to be made of like skin.
It is.
Like human skin. And there's these hulking Nazi zombies floating across towards the windmill. And you just go, wow.
And they just wave. They wave by. So this is,
So Richard, you made the first trailer, I think, in 2003. Take us from there, and I'll show a couple behind the scenes photos that we have for the book. Tell us what happened, because this trailer really did go viral and people got excited about it.
Well, it was very hard at the time for producers to sell this project, because I think it was at the time it was just the time was not ripe yet, and so I tried, and then other projects with more or less the same premise got financed, as Outpost and Iron Sky, and suddenly my project was outdated. So, it was almost impossible to get a financer. And so then I'm also working in advertising, and there's one advertising called 180, and was working there, and I saw this phrase of 180, and it said, if you're stuck, just turn 180 degrees and just go do everything the opposite, and go full force. And these were the words by Francis Ford Coppola. And, considering my project was dead, I said, let's do an experiment. Let's go 180. And I switched all the elements 180 degrees. I literally did that. The Americans became Russians. The present became the past. The slick photography, the smooth photography became handheld, found footage. And I changed the name into, which is Frankenstein's Army. And so Frankenstein's Army is basically the negative print of worst case scenario. And I made 2 more teasers, and they got launched on the internet. And then I got a call from XYZ, and 1 year later, I was on the set. And it's amazing.
So it goes to show
in your case, the visual presentation absolutely worked.
Yeah, and when I was, doing all the festivals of Frankenstein's Army, I realized I had actually a fan base. I was totally not aware of that. And I thought, wow, and until today, I get fan art. People are dressing up like creatures. It's fantastic. So, when COVID came, I thought, I probably don't have work for a couple of years. So I did a Kickstarter project to, I followed your advice, Brian. I turned worst case scenario into a graphic novel. And that's what I'm doing right now. And I love it. I have total control. I don't complain that it's not going to be made because I am the one in charge.
Here's the cover.
Yeah. So,
and if you, I'm just sorry to interrupt you. I'm just taking a look. You've also created new sculpts,
true,
action figures. Like you've gone just 100% in on worst case scenario. It's this thing that has for 20 years has not left your life.
Yeah. I loved it. I apparently it's made for me, or this is what I do. I love it. There was a phase in my life where I thought, no, you were a grown-up man now. You have to leave it. But then again, I just have to embrace that the things that inspire me is just very dark stuff, and it has to come out as well. So I just let it roll, and I embrace it, and I enjoy it. Yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to think about. The idea that these monsters kind of live within us, and they have to come out in some form or another. And so you found another medium to bring your monsters to life.
Yeah.
I'd like to throw it out to Brian and William, and just sort of ask. Have you been able to find a way to come to peace with some of these passion projects that you haven't got made? And is that by bringing elements of them into other mediums or into other films, or do you just have to mentally maybe move on to something else? How do you guys deal with that? Bill, maybe you could answer that first.
Well, it's funny because I actually have come to peace with it, because I understand. I guess I have more of a perspective on why things didn't get made or and various things, but also I have other projects which I'm also very passionate about that I put my time and effort into, and I'm actually at a point now where I just want to make films. I don't care actually if they get picked up or not. I'm just going to go shoot them, and and I think that's satisfying enough for me, sure, I still would love to, if somebody came up and said, here's $75 million, go shoot the mirror. Yeah, I'd be doing it tomorrow. But if not, that's fine. I mean, it all works out. And like I say, I've got other projects that I'm very excited about and so forth. And as of late, I've been doing a lot of like miniature stuff, which I'm having a lot of fun with. So it's
Can you show something? Do you have something there?
Actually, I have a whole room full of just miniatures, but unfortunately they're not here.
It's not there. Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
So
I've been building a lot of miniature sets and shooting a lot of stuff, and one of the things that I've been working on is a version of Fall of the House of Usher. I'm a believer that there has never been a great version of Fall of the House of Usher that's been done yet. So.
Yeah.
So where does that project stand? Let's talk about the
I'm
future
working
for a
on
moment.
it. Actually, I'm working on it as now. I'm like I say, I've been shooting little bits and tests and pieces. Although, and probably next year, it will be next year. I just bought a house, so I'm sort of consumed with trying to get that ready. But after I get settled in, I'm going to go full steam ahead on working on that and with the miniature sets and so forth. So,
That sounds incredible. So Brian, I'll shoot that other question over to you, and then you can also bring us up to speed on what you've been working on lately as well.
I think I have definitely put things in other media, mainly as a way to make it, kind of just make it more real. A thing about a film script is it's kind of like a blueprint. It's not its own thing. And so just like Richard taking worst case scenario, making a graphic novel, that graphic novel is the thing. It's done. It's the real deal.
Yeah.
And I've had a few projects I've done like that on. I have a project with my partner, John Penny, called The Pope. And it's about a seminary dropout who dresses up like the Pope and kills pedophile priests. And it's kind of a ironic, sort of ends up being a superhero origin story. And we knew that we wouldn't get, it's hard, a script, nobody reads it anyway. People generally hire somebody to read a script. So we did a first issue of the comic based. We wrote the comic. We said, well, if it's a comic, it's going to be different, but we'll have something to look at. And Richard did the art for us. Did the finished artwork, including colorization and everything. And then at the same time, I wrote a novel called The Pope, which is different from the comic and it's different from the script, but they're all really, they're the same thing basically. And the novel's only been published in Italian and French so far, but it's coming out here in the fall. So that's a way to just make it something. So if we don't make The Pope, it was an idea that we developed. It started as kind of a, just sort of a response to all these horrible stories. About this pedophilia and all this sex abuse, and you say, and I always remember I was visiting Amsterdam at the Weekend of Horror, the festival that Richard knows very well. Our friend Jan Gunset, and I bet you know Jan Gunset too, Bill. You've probably certainly been to the Amsterdam. Well, the first time I went there, of course, at midnight after the shows and stuff, he said, well, we'll go walk through the red light district. And so we went to the red light district and he said, I took Dario Argento here and he got very upset. And he started getting very upset. And he said, the Pope can't let this happen. The Pope must do something about this. And I thought, wow, that's kind of interesting. That maybe there's this idea that the Pope is somebody who can vanquish evil. So that was sort of just the germ of it.
Amazing.
And it was like, well, let's we did a photo shoot to have the went and rented costumes for the Western costume and did a whole photo shoot for a poster, and went through all this trouble of developing it, and ultimately then you have a product, you have something, if only for yourself. If only for yourself, it has been realized in some way. a movie. It's a movie. I don't know. It's like this this Tales of Blood Island that I'm working on now. We're doing a graphic novel of it, and we have swag and merchandise, we're the whole point of it is to make a movie. But you know what? If the movie doesn't get made, there'll be the graphic novel. There'll be the mask, which we have Halloween masks. We have a tiki drinks. It's tiki horror. You know? And it's just a lot of fun because it's based on the Blood Island movies of the 1960s, late 50s, early 60s. And they're really pretty low end, but they're really fun because they just have weird monsters, you know. And having worked in Indonesia for those years, I always wanted to do movies based on the kind of crazy monster myth or weird mythology in Southeast Asia. It goes across from Malaysia, Indonesia, the Philippines, all that Southeast Asia stuff. They just have, you know, we've got our vampires and werewolves and Frankenstein would have been done to death. But when you go out there, they have so many weird creatures. And David Searing, who's my friend and partner, had got bought the rights to the movies for remake and sequels and all that. And so we were able to fashion a movie that is basically like a series of RKO serials in the sense that every 15 minutes there is a new weird monster, and it just seems like a great deal of fun. Well, hopefully it'll be a movie, and if it's not, you know, we'll have the toys and the comic book, and so yes, I think it is something. It doesn't have to be a movie. A movie just takes so much money, and it's, you know, so when you look at your box, it's full of unrealized projects. They look kind of lonely there, but if you make them into something else, they take on a life and a life of their own.
Yeah.
You know, so, I think if it wasn't for the fact I'm only working on 4 hours sleep, I would have remembered the fact that before the pandemic started, I was actually in pre-production on a movie called Thallium's Box, which I'm hoping to, you know, get back up and running. I'm pretty sure we will. And you're talking about merchandising and stuff like that. And of course, if you're going to make a movie, you have to have the
cool.
What's that? I lost it again.
Yeah.
Can you bring it back, please?
Tell us about this.
Yeah.
Who is this,
nice.
Bill? Who is this?
Actually, that's a radiation suit for a guy who gets a job working at a place painting radium watch dials, and it's part of the movie Thallium's Box.
Fantastic.
It's sort of based.
Cool.
It's kind of based on a job I had when I first got out of high school. I worked at this place that was kind of like that. You know, there's people wearing these like crazy suits. And I remember one guy covered in paints running out of the place screaming. And anyway, it traumatized me. So I said, you know, I've got to make a movie like this. So anyway.
So what's the log line for this film?
It's basically a guy who's a former GM designer who is out of work, and he gets a job working at like I said, a place at painting radium watch dials. And, you know, and when he goes back to his apartment, he finds that everyone who is working at the shop also lives at the apartment. And and one night, this guy, who's this old guy, asks him to watch his apartment for him. And there's this giant box in the apartment, and he has to, he promises to look after the box, and of course it's what's in the box and all that. So it's great. It's great fun.
I think we'll throw it open to some questions from our audience members, but I'm actually going to ask a question that I think is inevitable anyhow to you, Brian. Currently, what is the status of the Re-Animator franchise? What can you tell us about the future of it?
Well, there is an offer for a sequel. But of course, I had to come up with yet another version of it. But I don't want to go into it because we're in the middle of negotiations, and I don't want to jinx anything, you know.
Yeah.
And Richard, can you, before we take questions, can you tell us a little bit more about this film project, or do you got to keep it super hush hush right now?
No, I can actually. It's about a place like CERN in Switzerland, where they are trying to control matter, and it's in the near future where they actually control matter, or the edge of, harnessing the Higgs boson. The Higgs boson is a God particle, and this is going horribly wrong.
As these things do.
And eventually what is going to happen if you have like two separated universes, and what we see in the movie is that they collide together and they melt together. And how will that look like if you are just walking around and the other one is just melting with yours, and what are the consequences?
That sounds pretty cool.
That's it. Yeah, it's fantastic. I have a deep fascination for quantum physics for years, and now finally I can do something with it. We got some development money, totally unexpected, and we are now really like doing the final touches in the script, and I'm doing a lot of research and making a lot of concept art just to figure out what is not being done yet. That is already very difficult, and I think I have a very nice, interesting new angles. It's a pure passion project. Yeah, so I really hope I'm going to make it.
So I've got a question here from Tim Merrill, and he asks, congratulations, by the way, Richard. I should say that officially. That sounds fantastic. Tim's question is, with Jodorowsky's Dune not coming to fruition, they say there was a benefit to many films afterwards that took a lot of the designs and imagery of Dune that carried several completed science fiction films. Flash Gordon, for example, apparently has stuff in it, and stuff in some of the Star Wars movies. So the question is, have any of you found the same situation for some of your films that were never released? And I think this was touched on a little bit earlier, but maybe someone has a good answer for this.
Certainly, my scripts have been knocked off. That's for sure. I wrote a script called Dead Star, which became Supernova, and Supernova has very little to do with Dead Star, the script, but Event Horizon has a lot to do with it. So it's very interesting how that what happened. And the script, kicked around Hollywood for quite a long time, and it was a favorite script of a lot of people's, but for whatever reason, it didn't get made at the time. And then later, of course, got turned into Supernova, which was not a great experience. So.
Which we cover in the book, by the way, if you want to know more about it.
Well, there's this kind of not very funny joke, which is when you go pitch something, pitch a project, one of the answers you'll get is they'll come back and say, you know what, we really like the pitch, but we have something just like that in development.
Right.
So we're going to pass. And you go, thanks.
I was listening to a podcast recently where they said that answer is sort of one of the classic Hollywood bullshit answers that they give you so they don't have to tell you that they're not interested in it. And then they can kind of protect themselves if they.
Yeah, well, that's part of it. But the thing is you're giving your ideas, you're pitching your ideas. And if you're not an important enough person, then they will certainly like it and bring it to another project, bring it to another development. A very good example of this is Look Who's Talking. A friend of mine, you know, that John Travolta movie.
The comedy
a friend
with the
of mine
babies.
made a short film at I think it was at the AFI, which basically had the opening of Look Who's Talking with the voice over the whole thing. And she took it to, I think it was Amy Heckerling, and tried to get her interested, and the producer of Look Who's Talking. And they passed on it. And then they made Look Who's Talking, and my friend was crushed, just crushed. She says, I went to see it and I was just hoping it wouldn't be like my movie. And it was. And so she finally got a lawyer and went after Sony, who I think produced it. I think it was Sony, and ended up winning like millions of dollars.
Wow.
So it was a direct lift. And she said, if they had just given me a few bucks and let me be on the set, I would have been the happiest person in Hollywood. But instead, they just swept me aside.
A lot of times they won't take the entire script. They'll just take some element out of it or something.
Of course.
You know, and it's like, I wrote a script called Vox, which was about 1988 or 89 or something. And I wrote a sequence in it where this guy is having a fight with this other guy on a tanker truck that has a liquid nitrogen in it, and it spills and turns the guy into a frozen thing who falls over and shatters into a million pieces. I think we've seen that someplace else before, and my script went over to the company in question back in at that time. So, you know, I've had actual complete sequences like lifted from my scripts, you know, but you know, you can't be too upset about it. That's just what Hollywood does. I mean, they you know, and they probably, some of them don't even know they're doing it. They're probably just going, I got this great idea. You know?
Exactly. It's not necessarily like a nefarious scheme. It's people are throwing ideas around, and if you happen to be important enough at that moment that you're the one that gets a movie made, you may be the beneficiary of ideas that you don't realize came from third parties. I mean, every time you collaborate with an artist, with an effects guy, with another writer, with an actor, you don't know where all these ideas are coming from. But a lot of it is fairly direct too.
Yeah, but it's also about collaborations that come out of failures, like Dune, for example. You know, the Jodorowsky's Dune, you had artists like Möbius, Christopher Voss, Giger, and you had writer Dan O'Bannon, all collaborating on Jodorowsky's Dune, and they all collaborate on Alien, and they made film history. So it can also be very important. All those failures can really flourish into a completely new wave of horror and science fiction.
Well, yeah,
absolutely.
There's really nothing new. I mean, nothing is ever new. It's just what's new is how you put it together. That's how it's new. You know, every time I have a great idea, I think, oh, this is a great shot or something like that. I'll sit and watch some movie from 1928, and there it is. I went, wait a minute.
I once actually tried to go back through my life in movie watching to figure out where certain concepts or themes came from in my movies. I went back and found things that I could say, yeah, that is where I got it. And I didn't know it. I didn't have any idea at the time. It was that was just what I thought should happen, you know.
I've got a question here from Paul Osborne. He says, I see Richard as the natural successor to Ken Wiederhorn, who did Shockwaves, and therefore someone who has a truly original angle on Nazi zombies. Well, and then I just lost the question. So let me just scroll down and find it. Sorry, guys. That isn't just shoot 'em up. I love the worst case scenario premise, and I've talked with Richard a lot about it. I hope that the graphic novel is a gut punch to a studio that just has to back it and see it made. So I think the question in there is probably, with the graphic novel, are you looking at that as something that's kind of putting a cap on worst case scenario, or trying to kickstart it into the film worlds still? Or do you even know?
I'm open for it. It's not that I have a strategy, like, okay, I'm going to use the graphic novel as a selling tool. Totally not, because when I do that, then it becomes corrupted and I won't feel free anymore. Now I have total control about the graphic novel. I'm going to use my total control. So it's going to be very wild. And who knows, when it's finished, I'll probably send it over anyway to some companies and let's see what happens. And it's not going to make a movie. I'm okay with it. If someone else is making a movie out of it, it's also okay. And let's see. I'm open for everything. Yeah. I hope that's a satisfying answer to Paul.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think one of the things we've learned is, you're trying to bring these monsters to life, and you got to have the perseverance of Dr. Frankenstein, really. You got to keep putting antennas up on the roof.
The storm's rising.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, if anyone has any concluding thoughts, now's the time for them. And otherwise, I would really like to thank you guys again for being here. This was just an absolute blast. And the only thing that's frustrating is, I could have picked any one of you guys and done a 6-hour panel. There's so many good stories and interesting stuff to talk about. We barely scratched the RE-ANIMATOR stuff. So I'll plug the book again and say you can hear more about it in Untold Horror.
I want to have it. Yeah.
And there's going to be a signing at Dark Delicacies coming up this month, and follow us on the socials. We're at Untold Horror on Instagram, and we post all of our stuff on there, announcements and all that good stuff. If there's anything you guys want to plug beyond what we talked about, now's the time to do it. Brian, how can we learn more about what you're working on? Should we keep an eye on your social networks?
We're doing a Kickstarter right now for the Beast of Blood comic, so I invite you to jump in and get one of them. I love the artist Steven Sestilli. Fantastic. Yeah. It's being done in the style of the men's magazine covers from the 50s.
Yeah.
It's a great retro style, and he's a great, when he makes his pages, you kind of go, well, that's how you shoot it. It's not a storyboard, but you go, oh, that's how you shoot this scene. It's brilliant, really good stuff.
It looks really good.
He's a real drawer, he's a real, a lot of comic books today, they're so digital. I don't know. They just have this kind of
it feels
unappetizing sheen.
Yeah.
I don't know. It just doesn't do it. But when I see someone like him, it's just
I saw the cover.
A breath of fresh air.
Richard, your Kickstarter, your successful Kickstarter is done, but people can still buy the comic book and some of the other cool items you created. Where can they find that stuff? Where can they learn more about it?
The other stuff is sold out, so I only have the books left. And it is where is it? I don't know. I don't have the link ready. I'm not.
You can just Google worst case scenario, and I think it comes up pretty quick.
Worst case scenario graphic novel, and or go to worst case scenario society.
Okay.
On Facebook or Instagram, there's all the information.
And all of you guys are on Instagram.
Community. Yeah.
And I got to plug. I've got restoration I did on my first movie, which is the restoration doesn't make it any better, but it's a lot of fun. It's called Scared to Death, and we're putting it out on Blu-ray at the beginning of the year. And also, I've done a director's cut of Parasomnia, which will be coming out towards the end of the year as well, which has got a complete re-edit from which is the way it was originally meant to be, and also has some visual effects that I redid. So I think it'll be fun.
And you can see behind Bill, there is a mask of a Sinjanor. Sinjanor came out of Scared to Death, and there's a
that's
creature.
the actual one from the movie.
So I'm a Sinjanor fan, so just pointing that out for other Sinjanor fans that I hope are out there.
There you go.
Oh.
This is the actual guy from the movie.
I love it. Incredible. Awesome. And then
fantastic.
lastly, I want to just give a huge happy birthday to Fantasia. Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday. Hey.
And thank you so much for hosting this. Thanks to our tech team. Thanks to Mark, our co-creator of Untold Horror, who's helped out in this entire process. Thank you so much to Mitch for extending the invite to do this, and just for being a great guy and a good friend and supporting all of us. And here's to many more years at Fantasia. Mitch, are you going to pop back on? Say goodbye.
Goodbye.
I want to thank all of you guys.
It was really fun. Love
Bye-bye.
Singer Sinjanor Bill.
Thank you. and
That was a great talk. Sorry?
We didn't mention Brian Yuzna's wonderful Return to the Living Dead 3.
I did mention it at the beginning.
Oh, okay.
A brief mention.
Okay.
Yeah.
One of the coolest zombies ever.
Yeah,
For
great.
sure,
Yes.
but thank you.
Mindy
Bring it
Clark
up.
forever.
Amazing. Mark, are you if you're on there, feel free to pop in and say hi. If I'm putting you on the spot, that's okay too, but I just wanted to acknowledge you because a lot of the stuff that we did today really is the work of both of us. So he is super appreciated. Okay. And with that, enjoy the rest of the fest. Enjoy your
Bye-bye.
weekend. Thank you so
Bye-bye.
much. Thank you guys.
All right.
Thank you
Thanks for
everyone that
this,
attended.
Bye-bye.